I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we are talking to author Karl Kegerreis about his book, I Wish I Had Those Gasoline Pellets. Talk about a timely name. If there was ever a timely topic, it's gasoline pellets, because we could use one right about now since it's $5 a gallon gasoline. Karl, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to Spotlight.
Well, I tell you, I was at Sam's earlier this morning, and it was $4.92 a gallon.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. And when you wrote this book, you felt like the gas prices were ticking higher, but they were nowhere near as high as they are now.
Well, I'll tell you, when I wrote this book, I was thinking about what happened to me when I was in the airport there in Texas after I left military police school. I got drafted from college during the Vietnam War, and it was my junior year, and I just got into Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana, and that's when I got drafted. And it was next thing I know, I'm on a bus and I'm heading Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And then what happened was they had me, they held us all get out of the bus. And then once we got out of the bus, we all received 10 cans, and we had to start picking up everything that didn't grow.
Wow.
And so I was picking up people's cigarette butts, and that's when I decided to never smoke again. I wasn't really smoking at that time, but every now and then I'd smoke a cigar.
Right. That's a good lesson, though. So this book is loosely based on your life. It's kind of inspired by some of the things you've experienced during your time
one
on
of the
this
characters
earth.
one of the characters in there is actually me, and
Right.
and the woman in there is actually my wife, Sandy, but it's Lily and Haywood Runyon, and I'm Haywood Runyon in the book.
Sounds good. And in real life, you served many, many years as an officer for the CSX Railroad, I believe, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, I did. And the last 4 years is when Homeland Security came in, and they want us all to be federal officers. And so I had my training with the FBI. Already I had a lot of training with military police, and but I still had my training with the FBI. And from that point on, I was a federal officer, and that's where I ended up.
3 decades doing that, correct?
Right.
Yeah, that's quite a long time as an officer. I'd imagine you've seen a lot of things during your tenure as a CSX police officer.
Well, I tell you what, I didn't want to go to Vietnam, and so I gave him one more year, so I go to military police school. And then I ended up in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas, training with sentry dogs for missiles. And that's what I did. And I really enjoyed it. I had a wonderful dog, German Shepherd by the name of Kim. And you'll see that when you look at, I wish I had those gasoline pellets, because she's right there with me in an upward position. And I'm in my military uniform.
I've actually seen the picture. It's a wonderful picture. And your dog is a beautiful German Shepherd. I mean, I'm sure you miss her till this day.
And I'll tell you what, when I had this is what happened to me. I was coming around in between the fences there in Dillsboro, Indiana, where the Nike missile bases were. And that was to cover Cincinnati in case anything would happen to Cincinnati during the Vietnam War. And so I was coming around, and all of a sudden my dog started growling. And I thought, well, maybe a farmer's got some livestock out there. So I put my goggles up to my eyes, and I looked around, and I saw this individual, looked like he was trying to climb up on the fences. And so I crawled to where the phone was with my dog, and she kept growling. And I told him, I said, if you come over that fence, I said, I'm going to shoot you, and my dog's going to chew you up. And I heard, Kegerreis, this is Lieutenant Baba, and I'm just doing down here, checking on you. And so when I got the phone, I called the security sergeant, and they're at the battalion headquarters, or not the battalion headquarters, but they're at the battalion.
Mhm.
And he said, well, he said, Lieutenant was in here earlier, but he might be gone. He might be down there checking on you. And I said, well, send the backup force down. So here comes down 9 guys with M1s all loaded. That did turn out to be Lieutenant Barber.
It turned out to be what?
It did turn out to be Lieutenant Barber.
That's a little scary. That could be a friendly fire situation there, right?
Well, what happened was that I worried about that from the time it happened to the time that I finally put Kim back in the kennels, and then went through the gate there and went back up to where the barracks was. And the security sergeant came out there and he says, the lieutenant's in there waiting on you.
Wow.
So I walked in, I saluted the lieutenant. He says, sit down. So I sat down and I heard a helicopter. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He says, that's the division commander from battalion headquarters is coming over to see you. And I said, what? And he says, yeah, sit down. So I sat down, sure enough, in walks the colonel. And behind him comes 2 captains and 2 lieutenants.
Wow.
And they all sat down, and he looks at me and he says, Kegerreis, call your wife. I said, what? He says, call your wife. So I got on the phone and I called Sandy, and I told her, I said, honey, you're not going to believe this, but the battalion commander is here, the colonel, and he wanted me to call you. And he says, you got a choice now. He says, I'm giving you a choice. You can come up to battalion headquarters in Wilmington, Ohio in 2 weeks, or you can stay right here, whichever you want to do. And so I talked over with my wife and I said, well, she says, well, honey, if it's up to you, you make the decision. So I made the decision. Next thing I know, I'm in battalion headquarters as a security sergeant.
Wow. Wow. So that's quite a story.
I mean, that's what really happened to me in the Army. But
Right.
what I was going to tell you is that when I met Sandy, I met her at Ellis Ayers and Company in Indianapolis, Indiana during the summer. That was before I went back to college and before I got drafted. And she was in her Girl Scouts department, a Girl Scout uniform, just a beautiful girl.
Mm.
And I'll never forget this, but my supervisor there in the stock department, he came out and got on me because I was stopping there every time I had stock and I would be talking to this Girl Scout. Mm-hmm. And so he got on my case about that. And I looked right at him and I said, I'm going to marry that girl. Wow. And he started laughing and just walked away from me. So we've been married 58 years and 3 months before she passed away with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And that was on the
it was just earlier this year, correct? In March.
Yeah, March the 1st of last year.
Yeah.
She's been gone a year.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been a hard time, especially since you guys were together so long.
Yeah, it's been really rough. We were like 2 peas in a pod. That's the best way to describe us. Yeah.
Yeah. 58 years. That's a lifetime for a lot of people. So you kind of become like one person after a while.
And that's why I finished writing. I wish I had those gasoline pellets, because she had Alzheimer's and she couldn't read the book and I couldn't read it to her. And so that's the reason why all benefits from this book, I don't care if it's made into a movie or not, but it's all going to go to Alzheimer's research. And that's
wonderful. That's wonderful.
That's what I want to do for her in memory of my wonderful wife, Sandy.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm sure writing kind of was a little therapeutic for you because there's so much going on in your head. Just to escape to another dimension and be in that writer's mode was pretty helpful.
Well, I'm working on a new manuscript, and it's called Alzheimer's Disease Still is the Love of My Life.
Oh.
And it's about what happened all the things that we did together, the two of us, and it is really wonderful. I mean,
yeah. So is that manuscript completed yet? Or are you still working on that?
No, I'm still working on it.
Okay. So we'll have to have you back and talk about that book when it's complete. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful tribute to Sandy for sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, I wish I had those gasoline pellets. Is a great book. And it's about the Vietnam War. It starts out with the Vietnam War, and it starts out where Ole Washington Jr. ends up with getting caught by the Vietnamese and put in the Vietnamese prison. And because he helps a bunch of American prisoners escape the prison, he's given a Congressional Medal of Honor by the President of the United States. And he and his family are there to go for the President's Congressional Medal of Honor. And what happens is he gets pulled down into an alley and he gets beat up pretty bad. And one of the girls there that turns out to be Lily later on in the story calls an ambulance, and the ambulance comes, and she disappears after the ambulance gets there, and they haul him into a hospital there in Washington, D.C. But what happens is he leaves the hospital with pneumonia and gets onto the back of a freight car, gets inside a freight car, and ends up in Detroit, Michigan, and starts getting into dumpsters where everybody and their brother is trying to help him. And it's just a real sad, that's a part of the sad story until it gets a lot better. But you have to read it to really find out what really happens.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful book, and it kind of, fills a lot of different genres. There's some action, there's some sci-fi, there's some, thriller involved. So when you're writing this book, I guess you work with your agent and your publisher about what will we actually categorize this book as, right?
Well, this is funny. I called the owner and the publisher of Wheatmark Publishing because it was during the pandemic and he was home. He's working from home. And so I called him, and the first thing he said to me, he said, I read your story on your manuscript. And he says, but I really didn't like the title. The original title I had there was, It's a Miracle Never Buy Gasoline Again. Gotcha. That was my title. And he said, I wish I had those gasoline pellets, Karl. And I said, well, I wish I had some too. And then it dawned on me, man, that's a great title.
It is. I mean, especially now. I mean, the fact that, in some places in the country, people are paying $7 a gallon for gasoline.
Oh, it's crazy. It's sad.
It is sad. It's a different change in America where, part of the American freedom experience, I feel, is the ability to get behind the wheel of your car and drive anywhere you want. But now you're limited because that's going to break the bank. If you've got an F10, F-150 pickup truck, it's costing you $120, $150 to fill up.
Well, that's just really ridiculous.
It's crazy.
And gasoline should never be that price.
Absolutely. Now, these pellets, I imagine, are purely your imagination at this point, right?
Well, what happens is that Ole Washington Jr.'s father is a scientist in the military. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to the Blue Book area in the 1900s, in the 1900s, but it was 1948 or 1950s is when the Blue Book program, where people were seeing flying saucers. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that's the way it starts out. And he's a scientist. And when he realizes his son is gone and they can't find his son, then they leave Washington, D.C. and they head back home. And he commits, actually, they say he commits suicide, but later on, you're going to find out in the book, it's actually murder.
Right. There's quite a few twists that make it very, very interesting, very, very readable. Tell me about your writing process. How did you start writing this book? Did you write early in the morning, late at night? Tell me about how that worked.
No, I actually started writing it during the daytime. And the reason I did it was because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't leave the house. And my father he was a Methodist minister, and I'm a preacher's son.
Mhm.
And but I'll tell you about my father. He passed away with liposarcoma,
Hmm.
and it's a very genetic disease, and I also have it.
Hmm.
And I lost my spleen, part of my pancreas, part of my stomach back in 2015. And in 2011, I lost my left kidney.
Wow.
And when they pulled my kidney out, it was the size of a soccer ball. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me go ahead and photograph that. But
Right.
I was at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, because nobody here at Toledo would touch me.
You're in the right place. Cleveland Clinic is a great place.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it was very nice. And I wrote a story about it.
Hmm.
And I've got it right here. Now, this is the first one. I wish I had those gasoline pellets.
Exactly. That's the one we're focusing on today mostly. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is the one I wrote about the Cleveland Clinic.
Right.
It's
I can see the artwork a little bit there, an angel in the clouds, where
yeah, who's going to believe they saved or prolonged my life?
that's amazing. Well,
And
they obviously did prolong your life. You looked like you're going strong despite all of that work you had done. My
well,
friend.
I'll tell you how I do that. And if anybody's watching, this is the way I do it. I look down at the floor and I say, if I come down there, I'm going to kick your you know what.
That's funny. That's funny. Keeps you off the floor, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about your years working on the railroad. Was there one or a couple of cases that stick out to you that were particularly interesting?
One was a farmer, and his kids had footprints, and they were breaking out our single lights out in this area. And so I got the farmer and I took him out there, and I showed him where the kids were running back to their home, and he could see their footprints in the snow and how they were running back toward the house. And he told me, he said, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, well, I'll have to find out from the railroad and then I'll get back with you. But I'll never forget that.
That's funny. That's funny. Good thing for the snow. The railroad police have quite a
I'll tell you
reputation
another one.
for
I'll
being.
tell you another one that happened,
Sure.
and it was in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yep.
That's when I was the division chief in Columbus, Ohio, but I had parts of Cincinnati. No, I take it back. That's when I was captain, and I was at Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hmm.
And what happened was that they were getting into mechanical reefers, and still in what they were actually getting was the hamburgers and French fries for McDonald's.
Hmm.
And so what I decided to do was I had my men go to the warhead or to our warehouse, and we got scoops of, this is unbelievable, but what I did is I had them brush, and because there's like a ravine down below, and that's what they run across. They run across this pipeline with and holding these big containers of food.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is I told them to just go ahead and put the axle grease on the pipes, and they did. They just put axle grease all over the pipes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget. Next night we were out there staking out, and sure enough, they came back.
Hmm.
They got into mechanical reefers. We let them get in, and then they were down there, and they tried to run across the pipe, and they just ended up in the drink, and it was really hilarious.
The grease worked.
They just dog paddled back to where we were. And I'll tell you, I got in trouble with the Cincinnati chief of police because he was very upset because they stunk so bad.
Oh,
Because
that's funny.
this was a ravine that had toilet paper in it,
Mm-hmm.
and good Lord only knows what else.
Right. Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, you're based in Ohio. Tell me a little bit how your surroundings and your environment in your state has influenced your work.
Well, when I was in Columbus, Ohio, as the superintendent, Actually, I was called division chief, and I had 3 states under me with special agents in each state. And I was traveling a lot, and I'd be going here and going there, and it just depends, what was happening with the special agents. And my wonderful wife, couldn't ask for a better wife. She took good care of our kids.
Mm.
And every day I'd call her and just ask her how she was doing, and she would tell me. And just really, but I love being the man that I was, and being able to travel like that and work with special agents on cases was great.
I'm sure. You had quite a distinguished career. I mean, from your time in Vietnam to your time working for the CSX Railroad, you rose through the ranks. I mean, you hold pretty high positions. So I imagine that was a lot of, personal reward, personal satisfaction, and as well as a lot of intrigue doing those jobs.
Well, when I was trained by the military police, I'll never forget this. One individual was thrown and he didn't land right. And he broke his arm in 2 places.
Right.
And the supervisor looked at him and said, "There's a hospital right up the street there." He says, "You just go on up to the hospital, walk up there, and they'll take care of you." And when I got back to barracks, I couldn't believe it. I mean, his foot locker was cleaned out. His regular locker was cleaned out. I just couldn't believe it.
Huh.
And I knew right then there what the military police was all about.
Right.
That told me right there what they were really all about.
Exactly. Exactly. What do you make of what's going on in the world today? We talked a little bit about $5 a gallon gasoline. It seems like there's really some seismic changes in the world today, from respect for police officers to defunding the police to, a lot of changes that seem to be happening rapidly.
It's all wrong. It should never happen. I mean, now the people are beginning to resent the fact that some of them have been thinking that way, but it's wrong. I mean, me as a federal officer, and I always still carry my badge. I do it. My wife says the reason I do it is because if I'm going too fast and a police officer pulls me over, I show him my badge, and then, but this is it right here.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was a court officer. He always carried his badge with him as well. Retired or not, he kept it with him.
And this is my federal badge right there.
That's very nice. That's very nice. The railroad police, that's, like I said, that's quite a group. It's a very storied group. I mean, extremely important, safeguarding the rails, because I don't know if a lot of people realize, but what a hub of transportation and what an important network it is.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been great. I really enjoyed it. And I've spent 32 years and 9 months, so almost 33 years on the railroad, and I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful.
When you look at I Wish I Had Those Gasoline Pellets, we were talking a little bit about it being a movie. And I can see that because it's a very visual book. It's very intriguing. It's got a lot of people talking about it just because I said people are curious about the prospect of gasoline pellets. And with all that's invented, you would think this would be possible. Tell me, if you were to cast this movie, who are the actors you'd like to see in it? I know Clint Eastwood would play you, correct? Although you're not young enough anymore.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I can't imagine him doing that, but
you never know.
Do that, I'd be fantastic. I love it.
I think it seems like the kind of work he'd like, because it really tells America's story and tells the story of the Vietnam era. You had an important story to tell. I read in the preface of your book, when you came home from Vietnam, you were treated pretty poorly, like a lot of the Vietnam veterans were, correct?
Well, that's when I was there. Actually, I left military police school. I was in a uniform, and that was before I trained with Kim. And I was there in Texas, and right there in Dallas, Texas, on a layover. And that's when a group of war protesters surrounded me, and they just spit all over me. And I walked into the bathroom and washed the spit off. And that's why I wish Kim had been with me after I trained with her, because
Yeah,
I knew they would never got any close to me.
exactly, exactly. Because one thing they don't have, those protesters, is guts. So if they'll attack somebody who's by themselves, but if somebody has some backup, I think they would back off, right?
Well, I'll tell you, Vietnam, they're still talking a lot about Vietnam, about the fact that we never did go ahead and secure that war.
Mm,
And we should have won that war by all means. And
absolutely, absolutely.
but
Tell
we
me,
didn't do it.
what was your tour of duty like in Vietnam? Where did you serve? Tell me
I
how many
didn't. I
people.
didn't. I never went to Vietnam.
Okay, but you were
I stayed
there
right
during the
there.
era.
Yeah, I stayed there in Dillsboro, Indiana, and then I went to Wilmington, Ohio, and that was the battalion headquarters for the 5th Missile Battalion, 56th Artillery. And what we did is we had actual nuclear warhead missiles underground on tripods.
Wow.
And when I got to be a security sergeant, the captain there, he took me out one day and he says, I'm going to hand this to you. And he says, I want you to tape this on one of the missiles. I said, what? He said, yeah, just tape it on one of the missiles. And I said, okay. He says, now probably the colonel might be with us or maybe not, but it'll be the captain from the barracks there that'll be with us. And I'm sure he'll probably have a lieutenant with us and maybe a couple of sergeants, and we'll be down there in the missile pits. And he says, I'll hand this to you, and I just want you to go ahead and put it on a missile.
Hmm.
So I did. I did just like I was told.
Yeah.
And sure enough, boy, he jumped all over the captain. He told that captain, he says, do you know you got 5,000 TNT down there on one of your missiles? And the captain says, no, I don't. He says, yeah, you do. And I looked at him, I said, I'm afraid you do. And he says, no way. So I went back there and they looked at the missile and they couldn't believe it.
Amazing.
So what I taped on it, just like the captain told me to.
Just following orders, right?
Yeah, just following orders.
Absolutely. Well, Karl, I'm sure you are going to have a very prolific career as a writer. I know you've written a number of books already. The book we're talking about today is I Wish I Had Those Gasoline Pellets by Karl Kegerreis. And it's a wonderful book. It's a wonderful read, but I think you have lots of more stories to tell. When you finish the book about your wife, I'd love you to come on back and talk about that a little bit as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nelson, I'll never forget. I'll never forget this. And that's this. And this is really what happened. We were up on the 4th floor there at Ellis Ayers and Company. That's where she was, the Girl Scouts department. And what happened was that we were coming down the escalator and the manager came over to me and he says to me, they're in the jury department, just the manager of the jury department. He came over to me and he says, Karl, why aren't you and Sandy up there in the employees' cafeteria? And I looked at him and I started laughing. I said, we both got called up personnel and we told we were making Google eyes at each other. And so we'd have to be separated anytime we were there in the employees' cafeteria. So now what we do is at 12 o'clock, we just go and find lunch someplace else out there on the street there in Indianapolis.
Awesome.
And he says, look what Sandy is doing. And I looked over there and there she was looking at diamond rings.
Amazing. And I guess the rest is history. I guess
he's doing this. He's doing this. And when he's doing this, everybody on the 1st floor thinks there's a big sale in the jury department. So they're all running over there as fast as they can. And next thing you know, the people in the jury department are thinking the boss wants them, so they're coming over. And now Sandy comes walking over, but the ring is a little bit too big for her finger. But she's holding in her hand. So he says to me, he says, well, you're going to get down there, get on your knee and ask your wife for marriage. And I looked at him and I said, what? He says, and she looked at me and she's just smiling. So I got down on my knee and I said, honey, will you marry me?
Wow.
And she looked at me and everybody started clapping. I mean, they're all clapping. She pulls me up, kisses me on the lips, and hugs me, and can't wait to get home and tell her mom and dad.
Awesome. That's a wonderful story. And I'm sure that's going to be in the book. It'd have to be.
It has to, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's right there. Yeah.
It's
all
wonderful.
up there.
Well, Karl Kegerreis, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. You're an admirable writer, an admirable man, and I encourage everyone to go on Amazon and other places where books are sold and check out the book. I wish I had those gasoline pellets, because I know everybody's saying that. Karl, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. And I
My
appreciate all you're doing for me. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, my friend. And I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you at home for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karl.